So, as we were discussing, you are playing one of the most iconic figures in really modern times. Did you ever dream you would play Diana?
No, I don't think it was something that I imagined would come my way. I don't, for instance, I never saw a physical comparison until somebody suggested it. I never looked in the mirror and thought, I should. So no, it really took me by surprise.
Yeah. We've seen so many actresses play Diana throughout the years, but you have already been hailed the best Diana portrayal, which is pretty amazing. How did you approach really making this your own, especially knowing that Diana is such a layered and complicated public figure?
Well, I think so much of what we do on The Crown is really like any TV show, any movie, is really down to the writer's interpretation of these people. And I think the way that Peter wrote her in this season, I really was given such a it's such a complex period of time for that character, and there's such a huge evolution in her because of the things that she comes up against and the really hard, difficult places that she's entering into and trying to sort of surface from. So all of that really, I got given this kind of gift in a way. It was like, this is your piece of that person's life to play. And yeah.
Yeah. How did you prepare? How did you research? Did you watch her interviews? How did you kind of figure out how to embody her?
For me, I think it's a really multi-step process. There's a huge archive that we have available to us if we want to dip in, which was slightly overwhelming because there's so obviously, especially this period of time which coincided with this news cycle that was born, which there's this ravenous appetite to constantly photograph people and put them on the news all the time. And Diana and Charles were, at that point, were really selling papers. There's this incredible amount of footage available to you if you want it. And I was so overwhelmed at the onset of this that it's sort of like, how do you do it? You kind of open up Pandora's box and you fall into it. And so I did a lot of that, and then, which was fascinating. And then we have people that help us. We have these amazing people, dialect coaches and voice coaches and movement coaches, and it's almost like a little workshop if you want to do it. It's all kind of voluntary anyway. But I just didn't know how I was going to be able to do it, so I definitely sort of pulled on all the strings.
Yeah. Fans, I don't know if you've seen, but fans have gone wild over the BBC interview and how well you portrayed that scene. How did you specifically prepare for that scene? Kind of break down. Did you do a lot of takes? Can you break that down for us?
Interesting. No one's asked me that. Well, I watched it a lot. Okay. I really watched it a lot because I think it was one of those things that people remember, and they remember how they felt about it, and so, and often they sort of remember where they were when they were watching it, because it was an enormous revelation, really, what that interview revealed. And it was a big point of scandal, I think. And so I watched it a lot, and I had it playing a lot. And because there's sort of two elements to it. There's the sort of sonic bit of it, which needed to be right, and then there's obviously the physicality in it and trying to understand what was going on. And I also spoke to a lot of people about what they felt when they watched it, and then I just, that was one of those leap of faith days, and they, you really just have to kind of do it. And I think people were nervous that day. They're kind of good nerves that you get on set when everybody's sort of like, kind of crackles a little bit. And we didn't do that many takes of it, really. And I have to say that so much of what I was able to do was also to do with Prasanna, who plays Martin Bashir, who's an amazing actor, and he, because it's sort of his interview, he had to hold that space for me, and he was incredibly generous to work with on that, and you know, because
It
it's
was-
nerve-wracking.
It was like you looked in a mirror doing it. Like, I don't know if you
I
do
definitely don't look
Okay.
in the mirror. That would be the worst thing I could do. But it was more like, and it's sort of like an absorption process, I think,
Yeah.
with these roles, and because there's so much footage available, and I think with that sort of stuff, the more time you spend with it, the more it sort of just becomes a part of you, and
that. Yeah.
but yeah, time is really, I think,
Yes.
the luxury.
Yes. Dominic recently said that at the first read through for this season, he was utterly intimidated by your portrayal. He felt like he needed to level up his performance. What does it mean to you to hear your co-stars say things like that?
Well, he never said that to me, so I wish he'd told me at the very beginning, like, God, I'm so, I never got a whiff of that from him. I would have had something on him then, maybe. But, I mean, I think he's been very, very generous. I have to say that I personally find read-throughs for jobs really nerve-wracking. It's sort of like your first day of school in this horrible meta way. And I think we were all very nervous and I think we were going into this as well, because it's such an incredible show, and you really feel this responsibility to keep the performances at that level. And so we were nervous, and I remember when we walked it was COVID time, so we were in this great big marquee tent at the studio in London, and I remember walking in, and he sort of like, we'd barely met, and he went, "Have you worked on The Voice?" And I was like, "Yes, have you?" He was like, "Oh, no," so maybe from that point on, that's when he started to get nervous.
Yeah.
It's sort of like when you go in to do a quiz, and someone's like, "Did you study?"
Yes.
And the other person's like, "Of course I studied." And it's
Right.
sort of like you start sweating, so.
Of course. I completely understand.
Yeah.
Finally, we have to talk about the fashion because, Diana's fashion, I mean, people are still inspired by her. The revenge dress, which I have a photo of. You in the revenge dress. You said there was a lot of pressure on that, getting that right.
Mm-hmm.
So what was it like, those fittings, kind of knowing and getting into this look and trying to portray this moment in her life?
Well, I think we all understood how important it was. It took me a little while to understand exactly why this was the dress and this was the moment that people really needed and wanted to see again on screen. And I think it's such an interesting, kind of a fascinating study of what was going on in her life at that point, because it was extremely kind of courageous and triumphant and kind of brazen, but it was also a marker of an extreme kind of point of really deep sadness and suffering. So those two things were happening at once, but yet to see somebody so luminously sort of claim that space, I think that's fascinating to people, that she was capable of doing that. And so we took it seriously, and also the dress itself, the construction of it is really, really unique and complex. And I mean, there were hours and hours spent in the fitting room.
Really?
And we have amazing makers who make so much of what we wear on the ground. And I just sort of stood very still, and people, I mean, really deliberated. And obviously, it's sort of also that thing, I'm taller and slightly different body shape, and so how do you sort of get it to look the way it needs to? But I think they did an amazing job.